And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Thursday morning starts out with IFR up here along the Arctic coast. Big area of IFR here along the southwest coast, inland across Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta to Bristol Bay, and at least as far east as the Kuskokwim Mountains, and then on down to the north side of the Alaska Peninsula. Marginal VFR back to the west, across all of the Aleutians and the remainder of the Bering Sea. Another big area of IFR here from the Gulf of Alaska up into Prince William Sound and on into the Panhandle. Much better conditions with some VFR in the central interior. And then for the afternoon, still looking at VFR, northern Kuskokwim Valley, actually Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley, right on up across the Yukon Flats with IFR, Brooks Range, central eastern Brooks Range out to the central and eastern Arctic coast. And IFR here, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta down into Bristol Bay again, covering Nunivak Island, but marginal VFR forecast for St. Lawrence Island to the Bering Strait, and marginal VFR for the eastern Aleutians. Southeast coast, all IFR extending back into Prince William Sound, and the southeast interior pretty marginal. And then for the Friday morning time frame, we're looking at IFR for the west central Arctic coast. Also some IFR here for the Seward Peninsula, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and right along the Alaska Range on down in toward the Aleutian Range there. Marginal for Bristol Bay and marginal VFR for the Aleutians. IFR, again, Prince William Sound into the northern Panhandle. And for the afternoon, we've got more IFR for most of the southeast coast there. Again, continuing up across Yakutat westward to Montague Island and the eastern Kenai Peninsula. IFR for the north slope of our Arctic coast, and also along the Alaska Range from about Windy Pass all the way down into Iliamna Lake there, and possibly northeast Bristol Bay. Now the IFR out over the Bering Sea is now off the coast here over St. Lawrence Island down to near the Pribilofs, and some more IFR with another system just grazing the central Aleutians. And for passes, Anatuvik and Adigan, tomorrow occasional IFR for both passes on either approach, especially the northern approach. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR, marginal for rainy. Windy though, optimistically, VFR. Back to marginal for Isabel and Mentasco looking marginal. Tanita, possibly IFR. And Portage, IFR. Chilkoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels 2,000 feet here over the interior, and then up to 6,000 to 8,000 feet over the central and southern southeast coast. So moving on from there to icing, you'll see got some considerable moderate rime icing here from about Cordova eastward into the northern Panhandle. Should be icing free over much of interior Alaska. This system here just brings a slight chance of some light icing out toward the west central Aleutians, most of that staying to the south. And for the jet stream, we've got west winds here blowing across the Bering Sea at about 70 knots, taking a turn to the north or to the southeast here across the eastern Aleutians. And then pretty good southerly jet here up to 110 knots right into the eastern North Gulf Coast. And from there, looking at 9,000 feet, strongest winds at this elevation farther to the east here, south to north flow, 65 knots in across the southeast coast, lighter over the interior, and back to the west, pretty light, not much wind flow at all, except maybe northwest up to 25 knots there for the eastern Aleutians. And about the same at 3,000 feet. The only difference is picking up these east winds along the Arctic coast at 40 to 45 knots, strongest again over the western Arctic coast, northwest 35 across the Alaska Peninsula, and some winds with that low to the south of the western Aleutians, just barely making it up to the chain there. And southeast coast though, south to southeast winds 50 knots, turning east at 45 knots into Prince William Sound. And with that, there'll be considerable moderate turbulence from Prince William Sound to Yakutat, down across all of the Panhandle. Also looking pretty bumpy here for the Alaska Peninsula. And up along the Arctic coast, areas of isolated moderate turbulence for the eastern Arctic coast, and also for the western Brooks Range out to about Wainwright on down to St. Lawrence Island.